3, 2, 1.
Very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist.
I'm in Culver City in Los Angeles in the studio of Mark Dutcher, and my very first question, Mark, is to what extent is the actual engagement in the
process
of producing the work part of the thinking process of it?
I would say that's, for me, the most important part, besides being, that's what I call the authenticity of making the work, is that when I'm approaching the making, the studio practice, that that's what I'm trying to transmit. It's that this, what I was saying, is that I want people, when they're viewing the work, to get a sense of me being in the studio with the work and touching it. The hand of the artist is in the work is important to me. So I don't know if I answered that.
No,
but,
that's, I think you do. Yeah, very much. I just think this is with the artists that I speak to, they tend to polarize between they think things through and then just execute.
Right. I usually have a set idea of where I want the painting to start.
Yeah. But
I don't hold myself to that, because I usually, when I start, the painting kind of takes on its own life, and then whatever process I'm using, what material, that starts dictating where I'm going to go with the painting, and also my state of being at the time, my emotional state of being influences the work often, and I want that to be in the painting too. So sometimes when I'm listening to music as I'm painting something, fragments of that text from the song will come into the work, and I just kind of let it happen. And so we talked about, like earlier, you were just mentioning about graffiti or mark making, or that's generated through throwing myself into the moment, into the process. So if I'm listening to the song, that becomes part of the painting. Back in the 80s, I was in a couple of punk rock bands. And so that's idea of music, punk rock, and fine art were kind of very entwined together in the early 80s, and it's like kind of DIY, do it yourself. And so I was in a couple of really bad bands, but that has always been a part of my studio practice. This idea of music and then kind of, painting. And so even now, I will listen to music as I paint, but then sometimes, the song will play itself out, and I won't, it'll be silent for hours, but that one song will be stuck into my head. And so I've used, I've listened to Joy Division, that band, for, since the 80s, for the last 30 years, and probably the one album, two albums, Closer and Unknown Pleasures, I've listened to that in the studio thousands of times. So of course that's going to come into my work. If it's like another person in the studio with you, repeating one phrase over and over again. And the song New Dawn Fades has infiltrated my painting. So some of the paintings, I use fragments from that song, or just the phrase "New Dawn Fades." I've used that over and over again, and I like that idea of repetition too, because as I was talking earlier about using a symbol over and over again, using that phrase from that song over and over again, it's somehow comforting to me, that it feels like the most truthful thing I can say is to use someone else's words that I've taken on as my own.
And there is, now you're saying that, and you're telling me about the background, your own kind of background with punk as well.
Right.
There is an aesthetic that I think comes through in your work.
Right.
That very much belongs to that particular.
Right. That's that idea that I don't want the work to be overly precious.
Yeah.
And I want it to be kind of handmade in a way that's, you know, if something's fabricated, I want it to be clunky and awkward and rough on the surface.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that punk idea is in my choice of materials too.
And now I can see that as well in your attitude, where to wanting to feel that the studio, wanting to be able to see the studio and see
Right.
the process within that.
Right. The idea with punk rock was that you didn't have to wait around to, if you wanted to say it, you could just put the band together and come up with a song. It didn't have to be great, you know, it just had to be real, and you just said it. And you didn't have to know how to play your instrument. And I was in a couple bands where we didn't know how. I mean, I played the drums, and I played on a Sparklets bottle in a keg, you know, and we were just really loud, and we played the same 3 songs over and over again at a house party, because that's all we knew. But we had, you know, and so I kind of approached my art making in that same way.
Yeah, and it's hearing the clunkiness.
Right.
They're hearing I think the cogs in the background is actually part of the aesthetic of it, I think.
Right. Like if I'm gonna add something to the painting or staple something there, I want the staple of the show. Or if I build something and I just want to build it as quickly as possible, I don't want to labor over getting every angle perfect. So I want to show that too, that it's just this immediacy. So I think that's kind of translated to this idea of when you talk about process and materiality and you know, the studio, that I want that to show in the work. And so also getting back to like artists that I'm interested in who have influenced me are those artists that I can see that sense of them immediately putting something together in the studio when I'm in front of their work.
Is there a sense of urgency, do you think, in your practice?
I think another that's important, this idea, I always feel like the clock is running out. And I think that also comes from, you know, the 80s AIDS epidemic. I lost 2 boyfriends to AIDS when I was coming out. In the 80s, I came out right in the middle of the start of the AIDS epidemic, and I had 2 boyfriends that died. And so there was always a sense of like, you know, like this, you know, this could be it, you know. And so I think that's in my work too, this sense of, you know, that time is fleeting, precious, that it could run out at any time, you know, moment. And so I think that's where that urgency comes from. And I still, you know, and yet, you know, I'm alive, you know. My friends, I'm older than my boyfriends that were 10 years older than me when we were together, you know. Now I'm, you know, you know, but I think I carry them into the work too. So.
Now a lot of your work is very, you know, is actually quite colourful, and at least on the surface is very cheerful. Right. Cheerful.
Yeah. No. I mean, I've been writing about that recently. This idea that I want to find optimism.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to approach everything from, you know, when the artwork that I was making after my boyfriend Thomas died in 1993, I felt like I had to say something about that, you know, but I didn't know how to say it except for, you know, I mean, I was fucked up, you know, back then, and now I want to say something about optimism, being alive. So I think that life has both sides, you know. It has that great, you know, that joy and that despair at the same time, and I want that in my work. I want a sense of, you know, that this is a gift to be alive, coming through in the painting, you know, that, and not be trapped in the past of, you know, or looking through things through a filter of darkness. So I purposely, you know, I made a choice to use my paintings used to be many years ago very dark, and I want to explore optimism. Oh.
This is just an observation of mine, and it may or may not be accurate.
Yeah.
But while I've been doing these interviews, it's occurred to me that there seems to be, this is a generalization, but there seems to be an aesthetic that is happening on the west side of America, on the west coast, that seems to be very aesthetic, bright. I don't know whether this is just an environment thing. Is that a...
I don't know. I thought you were going to say that there's this whole idea of like work that's bright but shiny and clean that I think is driven by the marketplace.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think it's highly fabricated pieces that have kind of a finish that, to me, the actual idea of the work is luxury. That's what they're exploring, this idea of luxury products for wealthy people.
Yeah.
And I actually think on both coasts, that people are now in opposition of that and want something that's the hand of the artist is in the work, or something that's authentic, and not that work can't be authentic, but if it's pretending to be something else and it's actually about this highly fabricated, expensive product for wealthy people, just explore that. I mean, the artists that don't hide that, I think, are interesting to me. It might not be my favorite work, but I mean, Jeff Koons's work, at least it's all there on the surface. Yeah. I mean, you know what it's about. It's not pretending to be about anything other than this pop cultural luxury product.
What do you think of Damien Hirst's work? Because that...
I don't really think about his work that often, but say I come across a piece in the museum, it's not that interesting to me. I think the idea of him as an artist is interesting, and I find, this is all projection, but I think I project onto him this, what's interesting is that I find him to be this sad person, that's trapped by what he's been doing and is trying to find a way out of it. But, I could be wrong, that's just how I'm making the story interesting to me of his life as an artist.
Yeah, no, I think there's a certain...
he's almost
he's had to become Jeff Koons.
Yeah, or Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst. Yeah, they become caricatures of themselves, and I think artists that are interesting, like when he tried to do Damien Hirst tried to do this painting show a couple of years ago, and that everybody hated that his paintings that he was doing himself, and I kind of like that he went for it,
because he's not. He's not a great painter.
Right,
he's not a very skilled painter.
But I thought it was interesting that he did it. He went for it, and I like when artists take that sort of risk of breaking out of the kind of caricature of themselves that they've maybe trapped. The market's trapped them into that corner, or they went there, and it's easy to go down a road that you don't want to be going down, and then all of a sudden find that you're trapped. And to me, it's interesting when the artist then confronts that and breaks out of it somehow. A great show to me, in New York, is Jim Dine's new paintings, where he kind of, it surprised me. An artist that had, to me, kind of stayed too long and with one body of work, and then all of a sudden just kind of broke out of it.
Is that a market thing, do you think, that when artists do stick to the formula that's worked?
Right, I think, there's, I mean, I imagine that, people want to make a living, and, it's hard to make a living as an artist, and, I could see how you could easily, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, keep paying the bills and, you know, and keep it going, and you could get trapped into doing things that you're not interested in anymore.